Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Czechast, the podcast where we explore the heart of Central Europe, its people, its history, its landscapes, and yes, sometimes its transformations. I'm your host, Vít Pohanka, and today we are traveling to the northeast of Czechia, to a region that has long been associated with coal, steel and heavy industry. But as you'll hear, there's much more to Ostrava than smokestacks and slag heaps. My guest is Jan Hradecký, a geographer at Ostrava University, whose work focuses on understanding landscapes, water ecology, and how we can protect our environment in times of climate change. But before we got in those serious topics, I asked him what it felt like when he first arrived in Ostrava as a young man.
I can say it was shock. I was shocked by the environment and of course a little bit different kind of people, because people in Ostrava are very strict and sometimes they are angry, because they are not all the time in good mood.
Well, let's just say that Ostrava makes an impression. But if you look closer, you'll see that this once industrial powerhouse has a lot to offer, especially if you are interested in history.
If you like industrial history of industry, I think that Ostrava is the right place where you have to go and visit, for example, Dolní oblast Vítkovice, which is famous for the conservation of the residuals of our industrial history. Or close to us, in Michalkovice, 2 kilometers far from this faculty, mining museum is located, and the concept of this museum is the last day of the miner when he comes to the workplace.
And yet, there's more to Ostrava than steel and coal. Jan has a particular interest in water system, and we talked about how changing climate patterns and especially the increasing frequency of floods are forcing scientists and planners to think differently about landscape management.
I think that one way how to protect society against floods is with the mosaic of different approaches, different measures. And I think that one part is, as I said, to open space for natural flooding, and of course where is it possible to adapt rivers to the changing situation.
A mosaic of solutions for a complex problem, that's a good way to think about Ostrava itself too, because even though young people tend to leave in search of opportunities elsewhere, the city and its surroundings offer something quite special.
What is fascinating in Ostrava is that is very close to the nature, because it was industrial heart of Czechoslovakia, former Czechoslovakia, but it's very close to the Carpathians, the Beskid Mountains, and it's very close, for example, to the riverscape, Poodří, and Poodří is landscape protected area, which is incorporated partly into Ostrava.
So stay with us as we explore Ostrava, its industrial past, its natural treasures, and how it's reinventing itself for the future. I'm Vít Pohanka, and this is Czechast.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
Okay, my name is Jan Hradecký. I am physical geographer or fluvial geomorphologist, and I am employee of University of Ostrava, the Faculty of Science, and at this moment I am head of department of physical geography and geoecology, and I am focused on fluvial systems, fluvial geomorphology, and of course reaction of landscape to anthropogenic impacts.
For us lay people, you study water, streams, rivers, and stuff like that in the landscape.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We will get to that in a minute, but we are now talking in Ostrava, but as I understand, you are not from Ostrava. If you were to describe your journey through the Czech lands to this part of Moravia, we are now technically speaking in Silesia actually. How did you get here?
I started to study geography at Western Bohemian University in Plzeň.
I think the official title is University of Western Bohemia.
Yeah, Western Bohemia, sorry for that. At pedagogical faculty, And I was studying regional and economical geography. It's a completely different part of geography that I'm now working. So, and after that I moved from Plzeň to Ostrava, because I want to study different part of geography, physical geography and geoecology. And at this moment, here in Ostrava, my older colleagues, Professor Kříž and the associated professor, Docent Buzek, established new study program oriented on physical geography in post-mining regions. So for me, it was nice that there is some application of geographical science. So therefore, I moved from a western part of Czech Republic to Ostrava. And after finishing my master degree, I was employed as an assistant. And during this period of my life, I started to study PhD at Masaryk University.
In Brno?
In Brno, at the same study program, physical geography. But I was at this moment oriented a little bit in different part of geography. It was connected with disturbing processes in the landscape, especially connected with very dynamic landforms in Carpathians. So it was connected with study of landslides and river erosion, especially deep erosion. So it was another part of my professional life.
So if I understand correctly, you came to Ostrava in the 1990s, right?
Yeah, 1995 I moved from Plzeň to Ostrava, and for 3 years I studied here master degree. Yeah.
The reason why I'm asking is, I mean, this podcast is for people who want to learn about Czechia, what it was like and what it is like. I mean, was there a big difference between living and studying in Western Bohemia and Ostrava?
Yeah, it was. For me, it was at this moment big change. Yeah, because I think that Ostrava was not little, but I think more different than other parts of Czech Republic, because it was in this time at the beginning of the 1990s. It was post-industrial region, heavily affected by industry with mining, polluted. Yeah, and for me it was, I can say it was shock. I was shocked by the environment, and of course a little bit different kind of people, because people in Ostrava are very strict and sometimes they are angry. How to say? Yeah, because they are not all the time in good mood. Yeah. And for me, because
that's very nice.
because I think that I am optimistic and a happy guy. But when you come to Ostrava, sometimes you can have such feelings from the people and from the environment. But now, when we are sitting here in Ostrava, I think that we are in the best environmental situation, because the air is very clean, especially during spring, summer and autumn, and I think that this city is quite good for living, and now I'm very satisfied that my decision was to stop here in Ostrava.
You're absolutely right. I actually did a program for Czech radio in Czech a few years back, when I spoke to the mayor of Ostrava then, and we were looking at the data, and actually the air pollution in Ostrava now in the 2020s is about 1/7 in some respects of what it was in the 1970s, and 1/3 of what it was still in the 1990s. So it has improved.
Yeah, of course. And I remember My first steps up the hill, because my faculty is located.
I bear witness to that because I walked up here and it's quite breathing.
It's located on the hill and above the Ostrava Pen. And I remember my first steps up the hill when I looked down the Ostrava Pen. And
I think plateau, maybe?
Plateau or this Ostrava basin, because it's basin structure. And when I looked down the hill, it was full of smoke and of many chimneys, and directly from the agglomeration industry. It's a part of iron works where iron ore is prepared for another forging, another process. So, and from this chimney, from Vítkovice, because in this time Vítkovice iron works still working. Yeah, it was for me. It was like to go back to the history and to see how it looked during Industrial Revolution. So, and through this hill, there was a huge smoke in red-brown color, and this smoke crosses directly through my faculty or above my faculty. Yeah.
No, I remember because I spent a year here in the first half of the 1990s. That when I came by train, I could smell Ostrava.
Yeah. I think that Ostrava had very specific smell, and I had a similar feeling during my trip from Tatra Mountains, and we stopped with my friend at main station in Ostrava, and we opened the train door, and it was like we were hit by the heavy air.
It was smog, basically.
By smog, yeah. Because close to the station there is some industry oriented on coke production.
Coke production.
And it's still working. Yeah.
Well, coming back to the program that I did a few years back, was that, Ostrava has definitely improved. I mean, in air quality, in environment in general. It looks in most places very nice, yet Ostrava lost about 12% of population since the 1990s, and mainly young people, because they don't stay. Now, you work here at the university, you work with young people. Why do you think is that?
I think the problem is that there's a lot of choices. Yeah, and it's not now a problem to go directly to Prague or to Brno or to Olomouc, which is very close to Ostrava, and study in, I think, completely different environment. Not only from the point of view of air pollution and so on, but in different environment from the point of view of historical cities with very long history of universities and so on. And I think it's a normal thing for young people that they want to escape from the family or parents and to see something new. Problem is that Ostrava is not so attractive for the people from different parts of Czech Republic. It's not normal to come to Ostrava study, for example, geography or I don't know, languages from Prague or from Brno. This is not typical.
Something about the strength
direction
of tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that tradition is very important. Yeah, especially.
And it's missing here.
Yeah, it's missing, and because Ostrava is not typical university city. Yeah, because there was located relatively old Vysoká škola báňská, Technical University, of mining, University of Mining, because it was in the name of this university, and this university was and is still typical for the production of people technically oriented. But University of Ostrava, my home university, is oriented more on humanities, social sciences, and so on. And I think it's very important for the development of this region, because we felt in the past when I was in the management of the university, there is something like gap in the offered studies in this region, and I think that it was very nice experience to took part in this process to transform a little bit Ostrava to different ways than only technical and some kind of engineering studies. So
when I came here in the 1990s, my idea was, when a friend of mine and me started a language agency, basically, we were doing language courses. There was a huge gap here in the market. I mean, there was a big hunger by the companies, to learn English and other languages. And the idea was that, okay, now mining is finished, more or less. The heavy industry is in decline. Ostrava reached the bottom, but now it can only go up, we thought. It has gone up, but not as much as it could have, I thought then.
Yeah, I agree that maybe we have more dreams about the future of Ostrava than we can see now, because there are limits. Still there are limits, and I think the biggest limit is in the number of young people, because if you want to accelerate the progress, you need, I think, well-qualified young people. And if many of them escape from this region, it's problem for the future, and especially if you do not have connection, some cultural or family connections to this region, you are here only for few years and then you can go to the different place. But now I think that we have some chance to improve this gap if we will have very good prepared study programs, which will be attractive for young people from different parts of Czech Republic. So I think that the chance of Ostrava is to create environment for some completely different types of study programs. But I think that we are still on one place and we don't move
fast enough,
forward, more progressive. So.
What sort of programs, I mean, just to give the listeners an example, what sort of programs have you got in mind?
I think that what I'm inspired especially from some Taiwanese universities or universities from the Southeast Asia, that they are able to combine completely different parts of science. For example, design and nature sciences. And I think that from these combinations could grow something new visions, new qualities of thinking, maybe not so conservative, but be more open for the different influences from different kind of humankind activities. So maybe it's
I find that really fascinating that you mentioned that, because quite recently I worked on a program or series of interviews called Science Without Borders for Radio Prague International, where we interviewed young Czech scientists who are this time in Austria, mostly in Vienna. It was together with the Czech Center, we organized it, put it together with the Czech Center in Vienna and Czechspats organization. And why I mentioned that, for example, we interviewed this young Czech scientist who's at ISTA, is this institute near Vienna, where exactly this interdisciplinary approach is the kind of raison d'être of the place. They even have programs for journalists who are writing for science. At the same time, they've got microbiologists, chemists, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that it's new open space, and we must try to prepare something new, because when we go in the conservative ways, I think that for young people it's not so innovative and not so attractive. So
not cool for them.
Not cool. Yes, not sexy. Yeah, of course. And I think it's one way how to do it. And from my branch is I think very interesting to incorporate in our studies more informatics, more research connected with analysis of remote sensing data and so on. And in the past it was impossible to have plane and to do some or to have some new images of the surface. Now we have drones, and now it's no problem to go with students in the field, and they can obtain a lot of images, and after that they can analyze them, and they are in this process. Not that they are only consumers of data sets which are provided by different agencies or some state organizations and so on. We are in, and we can do it immediately on time. So,
in this respect, sometimes it may seem a little bit of a cliche to ask about AI, because everybody is talking about it. But having said that, even no matter whether you research or do your research in humanities or natural sciences, you work with data or material. And AI makes it possible to kind of sift through that and to get the analysis. So let me ask you, in your field of geography, are you already using AI, or do you see that as a game changer, or is that...
Yeah, I think that AI is a big challenge. How to incorporate these tools into our research, because in the past, when you have data set, it was very complicated how to analyze it. You need some tools and softwares and so on. And now it's possible to use this data set and put it into the AI environment and ask AI whatever you want. Yeah, what kind of analysis you need, what kind of data that you obtain back, and so on. But problem is that it's definitely connected that what do you want to need for this research and this analysis. The use of AI doesn't mean that you will not be good in statistics or your own science. It's not this. It's bad vision to use AI in such way. It's bad way. Yeah, but it will be, I think, very helpful for researchers, for students. Yeah, perfect. I can show you some pictures that I prepared in AI as a joke for example, my conference talk. Yeah, but it's just joke. Yeah, but it's nice that you can be creative in this part of science.
I like to think of AI as a kind of instrument, and a very powerful instrument. And I like to think of an example of someone who has let's say, a block of granite, and he has a very strong power tool with which he or she can work with the granite. But that doesn't make him or her a sculptor, that he or she will produce something beautiful. But if you have someone who really knows what he or she is doing, then it can, help to create something really beautiful in a very short period of time.
Yeah, of course. I think it doesn't mean when we will use AI that we lost our invention. I think that I look at this in different way, that we must be much more creative than the AI, because maybe it's a future. Yeah, how to use AI.
You are listening to Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Today we are in Ostrava with Jan Hradecký, geographer from Ostrava University, exploring how this former industrial powerhouse is finding new life in nature and in education. Back to Ostrava. Just recently I interviewed Konstantin Kinský, who's from Czech noble family, and his family returned after decades of exile in France, and he's trying to build on the old traditions, he's trying to create something in the Vysočina region, in my hometown. And why I'm saying that, do you believe that there are traditions, be it university, be it culture, that you can build on here in Ostrava? I know it might be a challenging question, but I like to ask direct questions.
I think that yes, because I believe in it. Because when I came to Ostrava, I feel that if we can be good in our field of geomorphology, we must establish something like tradition. Yeah, and this tradition in academic environment is called that you have scientific school. Yeah, because every university is proud when such scientific schools are established at the university. So I think that something like that is possible to establish, and due to this existence of this scientific school, you can establish some university tradition of the Ostrava. Maybe a little bit in different way, that maybe we will be more how to say it, familiar with students, that we will create university family, because it's not so typical for the, how we say, stone universities, old universities, because sometimes they are so conservative and they are so deeply established in their history, but we are not deeply rooted in our history. We can't lose this this history because we haven't any. So I think that for us is important more cooperate with students and to create not only sense but true story that our university are different, not little bit, but very different in the approach to the students than classical universities. And in this, I think that we can establish some kind of local heritage or something like that. I don't know how to call it.
You know, actually, again, it rang a bell. I took my son quite recently to Constance in Germany. He went there for Erasmus program. I drove him there. And the Constance University was actually founded in 1966, if I remember correctly. Yet they managed to develop within a few decades a very good study program. There it is more about international studies or international relations, political science. It doesn't matter. I mean, they found their niche, you know, and they created one of the best universities in Germany in this respect.
I think it's one way, or I am fascinated by one university in Denmark, in Roskilde University. This university was established on the Greenland without any history, and was established as a university which teach students by projects, only by projects.
Projects only.
Projects only. There were no lectures given. They given no lectures or very few, but it was very important part of the study to work on projects.
So you need to be creative.
It's funny because next week we will have at my department big discussion about future accreditation of new study programs, and it will be facilitated by Guy, external facilitator. So I'm waiting what it will bring to us.
Just to make sure that I understand correctly, of course, accreditation is the official kind of yes from the Ministry of Education that you can develop this program and that you can finance it. So you are trying to broaden the scope of accreditations?
We are looking for, as you said, as some niche where we will be original. Yeah. So, because there is a lot of similar study programs around the Czech Republic, and now everything is open. It's no problem to go study abroad and to come back and study PhD studies here and here. It's no problem now. But I think that we must be more attractive and more in contact, I think now, with applied science. Because without application, it's very hard to communicate your subjects to students, because now they are very open in discussions when the very often question is, why is necessary to study this, why it's necessary to know this. And I think it's a big challenge for teachers to show them that it's necessary to know it, but sometimes the teachers are on the wrong way.
On the wrong side.
I have to say, honestly that sometimes we are living in bubble, yeah, with very low connections to the practice life, and especially to the field where our research is applied.
But you, in your field, when it comes to the Czech rivers and the streams, etc., I think you've got no problem to find application for what you study and what you research. No?
Yeah, I think that our field of fluvial geomorphology is very attractive for practice, and I think that students are able to see that the knowledge and the competencies which are obtained during the studies are very important for the future life. So
they've got no problem to find a job, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that this field is relatively progressive, especially due to some hydrological changes of our environment, and there are changes of the landscape connected with the climate change, and many parts of our official sites, how to say, need such kind of specialists. Mm-hmm. So I think institutions like basin water managers and so on. And I think that we are prepared students or alumni which are very good in the field of adaptation for climate change and how to, for example, restore rivers and so on.
Water management in general.
Yeah.
You've been here and you've been teaching for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the students are changing in their approach?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In what ways?
I think that they have sometimes very narrow horizons, because I think that, for example, for geography, it's very important to know more from the different parts of natural sciences, because physics, chemistry, mathematics, and so on, and not only these kind of, how to say, hard science, but of course from social sciences. Because for us as a fluvial geomorphologist, it's very important to know something from the history of the region. You know to you need sometimes bring some information from the past, because you need reconstruct, for example, the river course, and you need where it was in the past, and we need this knowledge too. Yeah. And sometimes I feel that they are very narrowly oriented narrow-minded in the scientific field, but it's not. I think it's not definitely so big problem. Yeah, because specialization is, I think, during the last years it was a very typical process in the science that you are good in very narrow part.
Narrow fields.
Yeah. But now I think that we must open for them different parts of the science and try to enlarge their knowledge. Yeah, a little bit. Because I think that it's not time to go in, for example, somehow in American way, because sometimes we see that, for example, students in United States they have no general knowledge, for example, about the history, landscape, and our planet.
Let me ask you, I know I said the last two questions, I still have one more question about Ostrava, but let me ask you like this. When I worked as a correspondent in the US, I got used to audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And I got this audiobook, Colossus, about building the Hoover Dam, how it was built. And I would have never believed that I would be fascinated by the whole story, how all the states through which the Colorado River actually went through had to come to a compact, how to use the water from the river. The whole process, before they even started building, then the building itself. But why I mention that, this is something that you study and research. The basic idea, if I may judge, of the book was it could never be built again in the 20th century because of environmental concerns, cultural concerns, because there were Native Americans who had been living, in the valley, etc. Do you think in general that even here in Central Europe, in our Czech conditions, that we have learned something from the past way, how we managed, the rivers and ecosystems, because we built, the whole series of dams on the Vltava River? Do you think that the attitude of the society has changed in this respect, here in Czechia and Moravia? And so
I think that you can see very nice, it's a nice coincidence, especially with the floods. Yeah. When you go through the flood phase, because we are now in some floody phase, I think in Central Europe.
There are more floods.
More floods than used to be in the past. That ordinary people think about the reasons why it happened or how to protect themselves against another flood and so on. And of course, I think that we are now in discussions how to protect our landscape, our society against huge floods in the future, especially in the connection with global climate change, because floods are a typical feature for the moment of climate changing. And of course, there is a movement in not only in our society, but generally in global society, to protect rivers in different way. And due to this protection of rivers, protect society against floods, because we can use some parts of landscape for flooding, especially in the floodplain, and to use floodplain as a tool against floods. But it's evident that we are not able to use this kind of protection everywhere. It's possible to use it in some open space or free
in open landscape.
Yeah, open landscape.
Not built up,
and one part of this movement is connected, and sometimes they called themselves dam busters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that this movement or results of this movement is very good visible in the United States, especially with the native people, tribes, which want or they want to restore natural rivers and fish migration, because due to construction of such big water dams, fish migration was stopped, definitely.
Even though they try to build the special canals.
Yeah, fish passes and so on. And I think that one way how to protect society against floods is with the mosaic of different approaches, different measures. And I think that one part is, as I said, to open space for natural flooding, and of course, where is it possible to adapt rivers to the changing situation? Yeah, and of course to open migration routes for fish again. Yeah, so I think that it's one way how to do it.
Okay. Now the last question.
Okay.
Ostrava again. Now, on the one hand, I see Ostrava as this kind of really interesting place where you've got, for example, the music festival, Colors of Ostrava, world music with big stars coming. There's the Dolní Vítkovice area, which was kind of post-industrially changed into, as I would say, popular science center for public, etc. On the other hand, there's the lack of tradition. There's the fact that young people are not settling down here. What is living in Ostrava like? Because you came here from other place, in Bohemia. If you were speaking to someone, I don't know, in the United States or anywhere in the world, and has never been to Ostrava, what is the city like?
I don't agree that Ostrava has a history. It has a history, but different kind of history. Not, for example, medieval history, which is very typical for Central European cities like Prague or Olomouc, for example. But there are remnants of very interesting part of industrial history, because if you like industrial history of industry, I think that Ostrava is the right place where you have to go and visit, for example, Dolní oblast Vítkovice, which is famous for the conservation of the residuals of our industrial history. Or close to us, in Michalkovice, 2 kilometers far from this faculty, mining museum is located, and the concept of this museum is the last day of the miner when he come to the workplace. I think that, for example, from the point of view of ordinary miner's life, It's a wonderful example how to show people from the non-mining areas what it was like in the past. What is fascinating in Ostrava is that it's very close to the nature, because it was industrial heart of Czechoslovakia, former Czechoslovakia, but it's very close to the Carpathians, the Beskedy Mountains, and it's very close, for example, to the riverscape, Poodří. And Poodří is landscape protected area, which is incorporated partly into Ostrava. So for me, it's fascinating that during several minutes you are in the nature, and it's a very big value of the living, or why to stay in Ostrava.
I can definitely bear witness to that it's really stone's throw. I mean, in a few minutes you can be in a completely different environment.
And what is another very nice part of Ostrava is connected with mining too, and the heaps, because the heaps are places which are completely covered by trees.
Yeah.
So Ostrava is not black city, but green city. Yeah, especially during spring and summer. And sometimes it's very big surprise for our friends from abroad when they come to Ostrava and we go to the roof of my faculty and they open eyes and where we are. We are not in the black city but in the green city.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Czechast. A big thank you to Jan Hradecký for sharing his insights about Ostrava, its industrial heritage, natural beauty, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for the region. If you'd like to see photos from Ostrava or learn more about the places we mentioned, like Dolní Vítkovice or the Poodří protected landscape, head over to our website. We've got extra links and materials waiting for you there. And of course, if you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, share Czechast with your friends, and join us next time as we continue to explore the stories that shape Czechia and its people. Until then, I'm Vít Pohanka, thanks for listening, stay curious, and naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.